things can feel a little cutthroat, but there's such a wider audience out there just waiting to discover role-playing games, and I know they're going to have so much fun with it that I think it shouldn't be a problem to, like you say, treat people fairly. And
my name is Jeremy Gage, and welcome to the Draw Your Dice podcast. This is an educational show involving all things tabletop role-playing industry. Listen alongside me as we hear from creators, entrepreneurs, and supporters about their personal best practices, principles, and philosophies. I encourage anyone from the budding game designer to a seasoned publisher and everyone in between to sit down with us and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Draw Your Dice podcast. My name is Jeremy Gage, as you heard in the intro. But as always, the show is never about me. It is about who I have brought to you. And today, I have brought to you an illustrator, a game designer, a lover of the rodent variety of mammals. I would like to welcome to the show, Chris Sellers.
Hi. Really happy to be here. Woo. Very excited.
Thank you for being here, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure.
You bet. So thanks to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. As always, for the opening of this show, would you just give a brief introduction of who you are, how you present yourself to the internet? Please provide any links or resources so that people can get in touch with you or buy your stuff, because I would love for you to make dollars.
Sure. Yeah. Hi. So my name is Chris. My pronouns are he, him. I am online at hecticelectron.com, and everywhere that I am at Hectic Electron, Twitter, Instagram, itch.io. And I make role-playing games and sometimes make board games and video games and comics. And yeah, that's me.
I love it. I'm here for it. Additionally, as an icebreaker for the listeners, would you also give sort of a RPG lineage for yourself, or game lineage of like when you start getting invested in playing tabletop games, and what was like the first spark that caused you to start designing something?
So I first got into role-playing games back with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons version, first edition, and then dabbled in other things like RuneQuest and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other weirdness that I think Palladium have made, and first started wanting to make a game, I want to say after getting into Gumshoe Games by Pelgrane Press, and sort of wanting to adapt that system. And then when I got into Powered by the Apocalypse, it just seemed like such a ready toolkit for making stuff that my mind started popping off with all these ideas. So I want to say that was maybe 5 years ago or more, but it's a lot easier to sort of start with like make an adventure or make an adaptation, and that's what I started with. Did a sort of hack book of Pelgrane's Ash and Stars game, which is a lovely space opera, sort of dark and gritty space opera, and I did a hack that was very more about sort of space crime, and wrote a couple other adventures, and chose Raccoons to get into the actual making of a game from soup to nuts.
I love it. I'm here for it.
Maybe the Raccoons chose me. It's hard to say.
They always do. Well, amazing. What an amazing lineage that is. Advanced D&D. I've never touched it. I've never read it yet. Wow. Like I don't know. I know zero about it other than Elf was a class, but that's about it. And
right?
Thaco,
yeah,
the mysterious Thaco.
Yeah. I think that was like Dungeon. Sorry, what? Say again. Oh, Thaco.
I was just saying that
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's D&D. I think they, in hindsight, didn't really know what they were opening up, what they started. Maybe they did. Who knows? I don't know Arneson and Geiger's hearts, but they it starts with this tactical game. It's very war game based, and it's like almost an afterthought of like, what if we told the stories of what these people were doing when they weren't fighting dragons? And God bless them, but that wargaming start, where they're really coming out of a scene with the little miniatures a certain number of inches away from each other and stuff, like that has been, as a lot of people know, in role-playing games, it's DNA ever since. And it's not really what draws me to role-playing games. So I really like the story games more. But God bless them for starting it going, however we got started. Yeah, Thaco is totally weird. I got the Monster Manual when I was 12, and that was a long time ago. And it was, I think they didn't really know what they were doing. It comes out of this wargaming tradition where it's like they started imagining what if we imagined what these characters were doing when they weren't fighting dragons or whoever, and it's just kind of lovely. I mean, maybe they knew what they're doing. I don't know what was in their hearts, but it was, for better or worse, that wargaming is now in D&D's DNA and has had this big impact on the rest of the scene of the medium. And it's nice to finally be getting into more story games, things that are trying to simulate a genre of story instead of simulate a battle or real world physics or anything like that. But it's just so weird. I just when I opened up that book and I saw the owl bears and demons and land sharks and stuff, and the idea that it was just a kit for telling your own stories is just so great. So I'll always be grateful to Dungeons and Dragons, even though it's way too crunchy for my tastes. And I don't care about attacks of opportunity. I don't care about Thaco, And in the, I want to say 90s, 80s and 90s, I had to wade through a lot of simulationist games like GURPS and stuff, where it was all about how far would an arrow fly, what kind of arc would it fall in, or whatever. And I just don't. It's not worth the trouble anyway for me. So I'm very happy with where RPGs are now and this sort of golden age we have going on. It's just so great.
What was your favorite advanced D&D character?
I think my favorite was I don't even remember back then. Like, I was running games and I had a ranger, some guy who was sort of Aragorn light. But my favorite character that's almost D&D, which was a Pathfinder character that technically was a Kitsune swashbuckler. Ooh. And I was getting into all the little mini games that Pathfinder put together, like swashbucklers have a panache system. And you sort of build up points of panache and spend them on cool moves. And again, still too crunchy for my taste, but I do kind of like little mini games if they're elegantly done. And so he was very much the Disney Robin Hood Fox. And say, ha ha, huzzah, I will save you. People who did not need saving, And as his character got more experienced, he got more tails because Kitsunes have these magical abilities. So he's probably the closest thing to a favorite D&D character that I have.
Aw, I love that. I love that so much. God. Now I'm trying to remember what my first D&D character was. I think it was a monk. I think it was a silent monk. That just worked for someone else. Yeah, so I didn't talk. I did not. I used as much, like, what do you call it? Body comedy? Physical comedy? Yeah, as much physical comedy as possible to illustrate any points I needed to make.
Did you not even talk as a player? Or
no.
Just your character? No, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I did do, like, when it came down to combat, I did have to like give intent of my actions. But my brother played like a gangster ringleader sort of rogue character, and we were buddied up. So
nice.
Did a lot of the talking for me.
Oh, great, cool, wow, that sounds awesome.
I always like duo characters. That's what I strive to always make when I play games.
The character I remember most from those early days of Dungeons and Dragons was my brother's character, who was some sort of Viking warrior, and I was running the games, and I clearly was not making them hard enough because we were just figuring out these rules on our own, and he quickly sort of maxed out, and his character just got maxed out, where suddenly he had the wand of Asmodeus, and he was ascending to Norse demigodhood, and there was just no point in playing him anymore because there was nothing he couldn't do. When I'm running him through just different characters from Deities and Demigods book, and he's just killing gods, it's like, oh God, okay, fine, yeah. Clearly I had missed something, but it was probably more fun that way, because if it had just been me as the dungeon master trying to kill his character, that's not fun. Yeah.
That's when you twist the knife and make him the calamity. It's like, ooh, you're going to bring Ragnarok. Sick, dude.
Oh, nice. Yes. Yes.
You're too strong, and the world can't handle you anymore. So figure that out.
That's it. That's the way to go with it. Totally.
Young Chris.
I feel like we have so many more narrative tools available to us now than we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of those narratives and tools and junk with Raccoon Sky Pirates. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, you bet.
So why don't you give a brief introduction of the game and sort of what players do in it? Because you'll do a much better job than I will at introducing the game.
Sure. Yeah. You are a raccoon, and you live in the junkyard, which is pretty sweet. There's lots of cool trash, but you know that there's other trash out there. And so you and your friends, all raccoons, build an implausible flying ship out of junk from the junkyard. And it's messy and probably spews a lot of smoke, and it's not very sturdy, but it's beautiful. It's yours, and you're going to fly it from the junkyard across town to the suburbs. You're going to pick a house and steal all its stuff. And then you're going to try not to wake up the residents, and you're going to try to outwit the neighborhood watch and make it back to the junkyard with your trash and without blowing up. Because the ship's constantly in danger of blowing up. And that's it. Yeah.
I love it. What a distilled pitch, honestly.
It's there's more to it obviously than that. But yeah.
Yes.
That's the nutshell.
Yeah, there are a couple of really cool things going on in here, but sort of the first thing I generally ask in these sorts of interviews, why this game? Why did you make it? What was sort of the sparking thought? In the fall of 2020, our dogs woke us up, my partner and me, and were going crazy, and they ran to the upstairs door that goes out onto our little balcony thing, and I didn't see them, but my partner did, and the dogs sure did. But out there on this little balcony was like a half dozen raccoons. Whoa. Who were picking up little cups and turning them over and looking at them and putting them back down and pooping in the flower pots and scratching around at things and trying to get inside, scratching at the door. And our dog, one of our dogs, is like sticking his nose at the crack at the bottom of the door, huffing Raccoon. And I didn't see any of this, but my partner's like, how did you not see all the raccoons? I was half asleep. But they sounded so organized, too strong a word, but they sounded so deliberate, and they sounded like they must have shimmied down an anchor chain to get onto our back balcony thing, and it sounded like there was nothing they couldn't have done if they had gotten inside. So it was maybe a way of making up for not having seen them. I put this game together. Wow.
Yeah.
What just like such a unique experience became a game. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone else could have written this. You know what I mean? Like just one of those things where very serendipitous. It's a very serendipitous event for uniquely you, Chris. I have not encountered too many. I've encountered one raccoon in my life, and we were out camping and came in from the woods of my grandpa's cabin up in the Tionesta Mountains in PA.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
just what crazy, like smart yet clumsy creatures to
Yes.
watch. It's actually insane, the dichotomy that is housed within one being. I mean, then humans, but we make very much assumptions about animals and their intelligence. And sometimes I'm like, man, there's got to be just a whole nother world happening that we're not even able to comprehend when it comes to animals like this.
They are so smart. They are
so
ungainly, but they are so smart. And my hat is off to raccoons.
Yeah, absolutely. MVP animal of 2021.
Yes, yeah, totally. Yeah.
So the game does a lot of cool things here, and there are a couple things I'm interested in discussing. As always, everyone, if you're listening to this, I highly recommend going to go check out the game. You can find it on Chris's website at hecticelectron.com, which will be in the show notes. But one, thank you so much for paying a humbleness to the D12, my favorite dice, the sweet small boulder. I guess one thing that wasn't clear to me when I was reading it initially, but I would love to learn a little bit more about how do the approaches work for also quick cool thing I love about this game is the specific character playbooks, not like archetypes, but like playing as like Rad the cockroach and everything like that. I think that it's a very cool thing to do. But could you explain the way that you do the approaches in the game?
Yeah. So you're playing a raccoon, as we've established, and that means you don't really know what you're going to do from one moment to the next. So what you do is random. At each character sheet, there's 6 raccoons, and there's also 6 possums and 6 other trash animals like Rad the indestructible cockroach. And each one of these has a different list of 12 possible actions at the bottom of the character sheet. And you roll to see what you're going to do. You roll a d12. But before you roll, in addition to 12 actions, every character has 3 approaches to doing something that you pick from before you roll. So Brisket Jack, the raccoon, has cunning, deft, and stylish. The way you're trying to do something is one of those things. And so you say, okay, I'm going to pick stylish, and you roll. And if the action that you end up rolling, so I could roll a 6 or a 5, which is cut something or tie something together, and that is tagged with one or more actions. So that's tagged with cunning and deft. If it's tagged with the action that I said I was, or sorry, if it's tagged with the approach that I said I was using before I rolled, then it ends up being a helpful action. You describe how you did what you set out to do. If it's not tagged with the approach that you picked, then it's an unhelpful action and things go wrong. Things go bad. So you have a 50-50 chance of your action being tagged with the approach that you picked. And things could go well, things could go horribly, comically wrong. And there's a way that you can finesse it if you want to try to make things go right anyway. But the basic idea is you pick your approach, but you don't know if that approach is going to be what you actually, the action that you actually.
It's so interesting because you could name these approaches for the actions and lean into it. I think what is really smart about this is just as you said, I want to approach this stylishly, right? So I roll, and if I succeed, I describe how stylishly I do the thing. Or if I fail, it's how did my stylishness sort of get in the way, or how do I stylishly fail? Or there's a lot of different interpretations that can take on, right? So I think that's very beautiful, and I love sort of the way you've developed a system that leans into randomness, right? I think a lot of the time we're trying to like hedge our bets in different games that have random outcome generators like D&D, PBTA, Iron Sworn, stuff like that. All have ways to sort of like use stats to manipulate the outcomes. But what it just all very thematically fits together, and I think it is the most like adorably cool thing. And it's adorable because it's attached to raccoons, not because it's like cutesy. But I love it. It's great. They are kind of adorable when they're not full of teeth and trying to bite at something.
Thanks. Well, yeah, I like the idea of the randomness with this. I like the idea of things going wrong. It's fun if things go wrong. It's a pretty goal-oriented game. You want to get stuff. You want to get back to the junkyard. But if things go badly, it has, at least playtests I've done, it's been hilarious.
What was sort of the inspiration for a system, if any? You know, you could have made this whole cloth, but like, were there any inspirations for developing a system like this? Was it easy to find like a random actions mechanic?
It was, the random actions part was easy, but putting enough guardrails in so that players have guidance as to how to narrate it, that was hard. Mm-hmm. Like I started this game as a 6-page, and it was everybody had the same 12 actions at the time, and just having 12 actions that you roll randomly, that was easy. But then people were like, well, how do I know if I should be amping up the chaos at this point, or if something else more constructive has happened? Mm-hmm. And so I ended up putting in a lot of structure, half of which I ended up having to take out because I put in so much. I was like, well, I didn't want to leave it. It was not playing well for people to have to decide for themselves whether what they did was helpful or not. And then I put in a whole bunch of stuff of structure to where my friends were like, this isn't actually a role-playing game anymore. It's a board game. It was all mechanics. And so I took some of it out and tried to leave in just enough where people have guidance about how to narrate the thing, but still have the freedom for what they narrate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I think you've really chef kissed the heck out of it at this stage. You also have some. Well, on the subject of structure, the way you sort of like break up the narrative scenes, right? There's sort of like a pacing that you've instilled into the game, basically like challenges log, if you will. At least that's my interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. Was that something that was a part of that, like, I need to add more structure to the game sort of thing, or did that come like during creation? And why settle on all of that?
That was a relatively early bit of structure that always seemed to work pretty well. From as soon as I put it in, it was the idea that there are phases to the game. You're flying to the house, you're trying to get into the house, you're in the house stealing all the stuff, and then you're trying to get back. And that just made it easier to know, since there is no game master. Everybody's a raccoon. Mm-hmm. Unless you're playing other trash animals, but everybody's a trash animal, and that was something that that was sort of be in my bonnet ever since I read Dream Askew, Avery Alder, and Dream Apart by Ben Rosenbaum. That was like, I loved the sort of devolution of authority to all the players at the table. There was not one person who's running things. So in order to do that, it really to work well, to have clear scenes where you know where you are at the start of it, and you know when to end it and when to move the story forward.
And I'm a bit biased because I love stuff like that. I love sort of that, not only structure, but also finality of the game, right? Because the game ends when you successfully, or maybe not successfully, get back to the junkyard, right? So there's definitely like stop point. I'm like a little less of a fan of like the classic meandering D&D 5e campaign where you're like hoping for level 20, but you fizzle out at level 13 or whatever have you. And that's not always super satisfying for me as a player. So I love games like this. I love games with victory conditions, basically.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it works well for this one. I'm ambivalent about victory conditions writ large,
Mm-hmm.
because I still want there to be room to tell that story. But it's super useful in a lot of kinds of stories to
Mm-hmm.
know when something went well and when something didn't, and like you say, to know when you've reached your goal or
Mm-hmm.
have definitively not reached your goal, and that can be interesting too.
Yeah, I love the sort of catharsis of it,
Mm-hmm.
slash also like goal accomplishment, like feeling like there is progression. I guess the big caveat for me not loving like the meandering style of play is that there's no real sense of like objective clearing because it's always one
Mm-hmm.
mastermind under the other one. It always the web always goes deeper than
Uh-huh.
you want it to, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that can be hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely like a pacing thing in addition to that. Were there
Pacing. Yeah, it's hard.
yeah, pacing absolutely. Were there we talked a little bit about this off mic everyone, but were there any sort of board game elements because that was sort of like your kit and caboodle before moving into this space to my understanding. Were there any like
Yeah.
board game elements you brought into this?
Definitely the sort of the sense of you're going to, this is what you're going to do now, or this is, these are your circumscribed options. And there's a deck of cards that I brought into it
Mm-hmm.
where you can, everybody has a hand of cards at the start of each scene. And if you want to make an unhelpful action be helpful anyway, like we were talking about earlier, you can play a card, but you can only do that once per scene. So the little bits of structure like that. First of all, the physical components, that's very board gamey in a way. And then the sense of, okay, you can play a card but only once per scene, that is sort of board gamey. And then there were other things that I had in before that I've backed away from. I don't even remember what those were anymore. Where it was like leaning heavily on the structure and dialing down the sort of player agency. And I'm happy to have sort of backed away from that a little bit more and put more player agency in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Oh,
I'm
and there's sort of a board too. Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're good.
There,
Interrupt me. It's about you, not me. There's a
there's
board?
a well, there's a couple boards. There's the neighborhoods map where you go
Mm-hmm.
from one part of the one neighborhood, starting in the junkyard, through these commercial and industrial districts to wind up at one or more suburbs. You can go through a strip mall and all these other places, and there's just sort of little hook ideas in each one of the things that you could encounter if you want to. Although unless you're playing like a later game where your raccoons have been leveling up, so to speak, there's not much incentive to stop along the way because it's just a chance for more things to go wrong. But so there's that board, which is the neighborhoods map, and then there's a map of each of the houses. And I mean the dividing line between maps and boards, I think, is really gray and fuzzy. Maps are a D&D staple from way back, and boards are like, what? That's not what we're doing. But there are house maps that I got from various architectural firms, and you're encouraged in the game to put a little marker for each raccoon in one or more of the rooms, so that you know what room you're in when things go bad, when things start going wrong. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. I love I like maps that are the in between of the granular grid and the theater of the mind, like the imaginative
Mm-hmm.
play space. And I love
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the zones concept that come like I've experienced
Mm-hmm.
with things from like Fate, and I think there's another game that uses it. Can't remember.
Um, yeah,
Also,
Hollow
Hyperlight
might
Drifter
use
does
it.
something like that.
Say
I'm
again.
sorry.
Who does it?
Hyperlight Drifter. It's by Metal Weave
Oh,
Games.
oh, okay.
They have
I'll
like
look that
sort of
up.
a more abstracted combat board with like it's a 3x3 grid, but it's supposed to represent larger spaces.
Cool,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, I think Hollow Earth Expedition does some stuff with zone. They're pretty fast moving, which I like.
I love it. For like, what is your favorite piece of design for this game? Like, what's your sort of precious darling?
I think just because I was such at the end of my tether with the random actions thing that when I finally came up with the approaches, that was I'll just always be grateful to approaches for giving me a way of making a game where things are random, but it still matters what you do. And I think a second to that is I like that every character has a different list of 12 actions that are thematic for that character, sort of help you imagine that character and sort of their archetype or what they bring. If raccoons can have archetypes, what they bring to it.
Hey, I'm here for Brisket Jack every day of the week. You know what I mean? What a sick name.
Thanks. My partner came up with that one. I thought it was inspired. There's also a little icon on each of the complication cards, and if you end up having an unhelpful action and you have to mark a problem. There's a short list of problems in the house or in the ship. And if you have to mark a problem and you see that there's a correspondence between the next problem and one of the cards that's on the table, then you have to mark that problem also. And things can spiral out of control in that way. So in that way, playing complications cards is borrowing trouble, and it's sort of a push your luck kind of thing. And that works out pretty well.
I love it. That's super cool. Only because I didn't know that because I haven't seen the decks, and so I think that's wicked awesome.
They're coming in December.
Hey!
That was such a. I really got in over my head with this Kickstarter. I mean, I'm so happy with how it turned out. But I was like, and I'll have cards, and I'll have dice, and that means they won't be ready till December. But
these are the choices I made.
That's right. Don't do what I did. I mean, it's all good. It's great, but yeah, it's been a ride.
Yeah, how was the Kickstarter experience for this game for you?
This was my first Kickstarter, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and so I was like, well, it was a zine quest, so it was perfect for me. It was great timing because I had come up with this game the November before in 2020. So February 2021 came around and I ran this Zine Quest Kickstarter. I was like, okay, it's a zine. I can keep my expectations low. I can have a modest goal. I think it was $1,000. And then I didn't know if I was going to fund or anything because I'd never done it before. And nobody knew me, and nobody knows who I am. and then I was like, I blew past that really quickly. I funded in like 8 hours, and I was so psyched. And then I was like, oh no, I need to have stretch goals. No. And it's a lovely problem to have. I'm not complaining at all. But I was like, okay, the first 2 stretch goals will be added game design, like campaign play and additional trash animals past the original 6 raccoons. A lot of love for possums out there. So Crew of Possums was definitely part of that. And then even the writing stretch goals ended up being hard to do because coming up with 2 rats and 2 pigeons and 2 roaches, as well as all the possums, that was a challenge. But then I was like, okay. And then for the next stretch goal, I was just, I hadn't planned for success. You know what I mean? It can be very hard, right, to manage your own expectations and to think, okay, I'll be fine if this doesn't fund. I'll be fine if it doesn't fund. But then to also be able to hold in your mind at the same time, okay, but what if it does really well, is I think more than I was just ready to do, ready conceptually. So I'm in this heady space of, hey, yay, I funded, woo. That's the mindset I was in, like a little manic when I was thinking, oh, I'll make all these stretch goals. I did not seriously think I would reach them. So I was like, I'll make a deck of cards and I'll have a 12-sided die with a raccoon on it and a raccoon on one of the faces. And then those funded, and I love it. I'm so grateful. It's great. But I had not, for instance, sourced where cards or dice get made. And so it turns out, I'm pretty sure there's only one place on planet Earth where you can get a custom 12-sided die made that actually has something other than numbers on some of the faces, or has custom numbers for that matter. And I think that's Q Workshop in Poland. If anybody else knows of another place, I'm certainly happy to learn more about them. Although Q Workshop has been really great, and the work they've shown me has looked really cool. But it means that, since there's just the one place, I'm kind of beholden to their schedule, and their schedule in the second half of 2021 is a lot different than what it was in February of 2021. And so I'm waiting until December like they'll probably get them to me in late November, and then I'll be able to send them out to backers. Yay!
Yay!
And so it's really great, but it's like planning for a Kickstarter is really hard. Like, I just want to say that. Obviously, I'm not saying anything new, but like I was talking to Avery Alder, who has been a really great sort of mentor for me, and one of the things she said was just two things she said was, don't feel like you have to give the backers more than you already promised, which is, it's like she knows me. The other thing was please make sure you take shipping into account. And I did not take shipping into account.
No.
I did when I launched the backer kit and stuff, like for add-ons, but I was like, everyone who backed at the printed level is going to get cards and dice. It'll be fine. It'll be great. And I feel like I'm just watching the More You Know star and rainbow go across my screen all the time. Like living and learning. It's great. I'm so jazzed to be in this spot. But yeah, the shipping is expensive. Wow.
And so, not getting better. And not
getting
better.
No, it's getting so weird out there. So I know that these are like not earth-shattering things to learn, but I think it's the simple stuff really that tends to trip me up.
I mean, part of this show is that we welcome all experiences here. So,
Excellent.
If no one's listening to the earlier episodes, this may be the first episode they listen to.
Right, so. Right. Okay, fair. Yeah. So I love fulfilling this, designing games, and I love the point where a concept becomes something that's actually tactile, something you can hold in your hands. And so it's just such a wonderful experience.
Yes, Chris. We love it here. Truly. I'm happy for your success.
Thank you.
Well, amazing. I mean, is there anything you want to leave the guests with as far as like Raccoon Sky Pirates? Anything like the shipbuilding or anything like?
Yeah, the shipbuilding is that's a fun part of it. You pick from pick list of a home appliance, a wrecked car, and an amusement park ride. And there's a pick list for each one of those, and each of those gives you something else you can do with your ship. And then your ship is just made of all this other junk that you sort of discover in flight. And you just keep glomming stuff on and find uses for trash. There's infinite uses for trash.
Infinite.
Yeah.
Infinite uses. Well, become a raccoon, become a sky pirate, build a ship that doesn't really work sometimes. Get the game. Just check it out. Check out Raccoon Sky Pirates at hecticelectron.com near you.
Thanks. Yes, please do. Let me know what you think.
So, Chris, in this segment of the show is sort of trends, tips, tricks, topics, whatever have you, of things that you're interested in exploring, talking about inside of the tabletop space. Are you still there, Chris?
You're breaking up again.
Hello, Chris.
Hi, I'm here. Okay, I can hear you.
Cool.
Sorry, you were breaking
There's a little offline scare. So, Chris, in this section is a little bit of like a trends, tips, tricks situation of things that you're interested in talking about in the tabletop space. I know that when we sort of got the questionnaire through, you wanted to sort of talk about the community around the queer game design space and things like Big Bad Con and Gen Con and Origins. And you haven't been to Big Bad Con yet, correct?
Right. No, I haven't been yet. I'm super looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, what is it about the community that you love so much?
Oh, it's just so wonderful. I think there's so much love and camaraderie in this community, and so much cool design spaces being opened up. A big part of the appeal of role-playing games for me is the chance to imagine myself as somebody else and kind of explore new parts of me as a result. And I think I'm seeing that so much in the queer role-playing game community. It's there's so much exploration in the queer community in general in terms of new ways of being, new gender roles to take on, or busting up gender roles completely, and letting your hair down, letting yourself be more fully the way you might not be able to be in the sort of larger community. And it's like role playing games just dovetail with that so well. So I love it, and that there's such a golden age going on of new kinds of role playing games coming out. I see that I see that banner being carried to a large degree by queer role playing game designers. And maybe that's just because they're who I'm following more, but there's such neat new modes of playing and ways of playing a game I'm seeing there.
Anyone in recent memory that you want to particularly shout out as being an inspiration for this?
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Avery Alder. She's incredible, but she's a legend already. I think additionally, Jamila Najati is doing super interesting stuff. He's just like, Apocalypse Keys is really great and really running with the idea of what if rolling a 10 plus in Powered by the Apocalypse is actually a bad thing or is, unhelpful. And that's just scratching the surface of what Jamie has been doing. Those are the two that come to mind first. But there's, oh boy, Jolie St. Patrick made this super wild game called The Dreaming Crucible. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on. And it's really great. And itch.io is full of designers, them and lots of other people.
Has there been any particular interaction or space or event what was a sort of like first event that really made you feel like you were kind of home, if that makes sense, right? Home inside of this community.
I think both reading Monster Hearts and seeing seeing a lot of my own lessons reflected in those monsters and hearing an actual play that Avery Alder did of Monster Hearts. I think it was on +1 Forward, but just wherever it was, hearing an actual play with just so much both body horror but also good humor was just like, oh, this is a place where we can experiment, and the stakes aren't too high. It's just friends sitting around a table, helping to tell a story together. So I think that was Monster Hearts was probably the first time where I was like, yes. There's also a great group here in Columbus called Story Games Columbus, and there's a lot of great queer folks who meet once a month there. And then not everyone there is queer, but it was just really great to sort of see myself reflected in the folks around the table.
I fucking love it. Also, hello, fellow Ohioan. I live over in the greater Cleveland area, but wow, I love all of that. It's, I'm learning more and more every day about how to lift all ships in terms of the new, like you said, we're in a golden age of tabletop design, especially in the indie scene, but even on mainstream levels, because we have stuff like the Magpie success with the Avatar IP, right? Which is really going to start challenging the mainstream landscape that sort of like Pathfinder and D&D hold, for sure. Like that might be an intuition thing. I don't have any access to any personal numbers, but like it's moves like that are going to start transitioning people into like, oh, what's powered by the apocalypse, right? And then start to explore more open spaces. And, there's going to be some resistance from a lot of different angles on all sides, but I am a big proponent in this soon. I think it's fairly soon to come, like modern RPG sphere. People are getting really upset with the way that businesses have been acting traditionally for like the last 20, 30 years in terms of hiring freelancers, interacting with POC or queer communities, hiring those individuals, using those individuals, tokenizing them.
Yeah.
And I love that there's just this sort of like underground, I don't want to call it a resistance because it sounds like it's hiding, and it's definitely not hiding.
There's definitely something coming up from the grassroots, right?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and it's great. It's so wonderful. And I know most role-playing games don't make any money. I'm certainly nowhere close to making money, but it's hard for people to come up, and it's hard for people to things can feel a little cutthroat, but there's such a wider audience out there just waiting to discover role-playing games, and I know they're going to have so much fun with it that I think it shouldn't be a problem to, like you say, treat people fairly and allow for more voices at the table. We don't have to have a sort of scarcity mentality around this.
Yeah. And I love that people are like making a space for themselves too, not just waiting for the permission of the pre-built tables, but also like, hey, this is my room. This is my dining hall. I created these seats for these people. Come and sit down, right? Like,
well said. Yeah.
I'm a big, there is definitely something for the accountability of major platforms that need to think about the diversity in their principles, values, morals, all of those things. But I also think there's a sense of like, I don't, as a Black creator making this podcast, I'm not going to wait for permission from someone to like join and no like shade towards them. But like, I'm not going to wait for Tabletop Babble or like One Shot Network to pick me up so I can be famous or make money or whatever. Like, I'll just wait. I'll do my own thing. I'll do it my way. And when success comes in my version, then I'll be more than exponentially happy about that. And I want that for a lot of people. I want them to know that like you said, sort of grassroots, like we finally realize we don't have to bend to these larger powers. We have the ability to decide for ourselves, especially with all the modern tools laid out before us.
Yeah, totally. Oh God, yeah. I think you've got to be right that things are opening up and things are getting better.
I love it. Well, that's gonna bring us to about the 60-minute mark here, Chris. Is there anything else you kind of want to touch base with here, or how do you feel?
I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of these. It seems pretty good to me.
I guess the last thing is like you're going to Big Bad Con, right? So
yes. And it's online only this year. It's a one day thing this year, but I'm still so psyched. So, like,
do you have a kiosk or something?
I do not have a kiosk. I'm just going, but I'm going to learn so much, and I'm going to go to all the panels I can, just soak in the community and all the love that I have expected to find there and that I've already found in the community, the folks who are going there. I just can't wait. I remember a couple of years ago, one designer that I followed, it might have been Avery, saying, I've been going to smaller cons like UConn and Big Bad Con and as opposed to Gen Con and Origins, and the payoff in terms of community has been so much better. Yes. And I will probably always go to Origins and Gen Con if only to see friends. But I'm really looking forward to getting more into the smaller con scene where there's time to catch up with the creators you love. Yeah. And there's more heart to it and less just being crushed into a ballroom somewhere.
A swirl of open wallets and and backpacks.
Yeah, so I can't wait. And so what's a kiosk at Big Bad Con? Is this a thing? You mean just like having a table?
Yeah, like a table. Yeah, I've seen, what was it? Session Zero online did like a kiosk thing, which was really cool. They used Gather Town to sort of
cool.
Illustrate that. So I was just curious if Big Bad Con was doing something similar. It doesn't sound like the case at this point, but I am also really excited for like what does, because we've been forced to be home, right, for a year here in America. We've had to think finally for the last 100 years, and I would be so interested to see how the digital landscape and how like the scalability of conventions can really change. I'm sure there is. I've never been to a convention, but I'm sure there is. You know, it's like going to a concert. There's just a different energy when you're in a space with a ton of people who are all vibing with the same thing you're vibing with.
Yeah.
But I would love to see what that scalability looks like.
I love the way at Gen Con, the whole downtown suddenly is in love with D&D and role-playing games in general. and you get these fantasy-themed drinks at the bars. And I love that stuff. And I love I love sitting down at a table with a bunch of strangers to run a game or play a game.
Yes.
It's like speed dating for gamers, for gaming groups. And it's funny because I think of myself as very introverted, but maybe there's just enough structure at a 4-hour game slot that I can really let my hair down and be really genuine with 4 or 5 other people. It's fantastic. So yeah, I love cons and I miss in-person cons, and we're just gonna have to be safe and be sensible. But I can't wait to see what Big Bad Con does, because every year they do something that seems really special. So I'm sure that their online one's going to be special too.
Yes. Also, not sponsored by Big Bad Con, but Big Bad Con, if you're listening, I would love a sponsorship. That'd be sick. But I think that's going to bring us to the top here, Chris. I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Yes, of course. I'm glad you reached out. Everyone at home, real quick, Chris, would you just give an outro of places where people can get in touch with you, find your stuff, just in case they made it all the way here?
Yes. Sky Pirates is at hecticelectron.itch.io, and I'm at hecticelectron.com, HECTICELECTRON. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at hecticelectron.
Yes, and the Instagram illustrations are amazing. I love them.
Thank you.
So please go check those out. Thank you so much, everyone, for sitting down with us and learning from Chris, because I certainly learned a lot sitting here with him, and I hope that you will join us next time. Say bye to the people, Chris.
Bye, people. Take care.
Bye, people. Goodbye. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and hang out with Chris and I. We really appreciate it. You can find links and resources down below in the show notes, such as getting in touch with Chris or other episodes with similar topics. If you want to be a part of the conversation, please come and join the community Discord server. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Draw Your Dice Patreon, where you can get access to early releases of episodes from as soon as we interview. Thanks again for stopping by, and as always, I will catch you next time.